Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Today our topic is everything will start as a heavy rain on a sunny day at a time you least expect it. And I know that's too long to put on the description area, so we'll call it dollar, Russia, and Israel. However, this is really one of the major points I'm trying to make today. In other words, most people are totally clueless. They do not understand that the dollar's about to fall, that Russia and also NATO and America, that the nations are preparing for war. They don't understand that. And frankly, they don't want to know. They just want to live their life. They want God to leave them alone, let them have a nice, happy life. They are not interested in building the kingdom of God. They're not interested in finding out what He wants for their life, stopping what they want to do what He wants. They could care less. So God is about to get their attention. And I don't know why it is. I wish I didn't ever have to say anything about, hey, we need money. And that's the reason Jason Meeks, I think, was given this dream that says we need to ask people to join $9.90 a month or more just on an automatic basis so that we can take out some of the dips, because right now we're in a dip. So if God has blessed you, you can help us get out of the dip. Now would be a very nice thing. Also, I called Joseph Kitchen yesterday. And I said, look, this is real serious, okay? Dollar's about to be some starving Americans. Is there anything that we can do to help more people? Long story short, took them a couple of days, but they got back to me. And they said, here's what we can do. We have a bunch of extra red wheat that we really need to get rid of. So we're going to make a a 1 for 1. In other words, if you buy one 50-pound pail of red wheat, now remember this is nitrogen packed, it's supposed to be for long-term storage. Most of the wheat you buy out there comes in a paper bag, it doesn't last very long, breaks, mice get into it. This will last for years and years and years. And if you buy one, you get one free. Right now, josephkitchen.com. Now, so that you understand, typically one loaf feeds a person for a week. Each bucket makes about 28 loaves, and each loaf keeps about 7 to 10 days. These are approximate calculations. The one I want you to look at is 8 pails feeds 4 people for about a year. But these last for many years. My suggestion is right now, while you can get red wheat at a really, really good price, is that you call and you get at least the 8 pail, maybe the 12 pails, 6 people for 2 years. Okay, you can get a whole year's worth free. Whatever it is, they're doubling it right now. josephskitchen.com. There's an S in it, josephskitchen.com. All right, this is the thing we're looking at, and I've got some new information for you today. We're watching for the headline, Omar ushers in Palestinian state. Now, I was thinking that it would have to take place during the 49 days of the counting of the Omer between first fruits and Passover. And we have now got a fellow that knows it better than heapcal.com, where I got my information from. He says, actually, the last day of the counting of the Omer is the 16th of June. However, let me tell you about this. So I got a call. Matter of fact, I got the call first from this guy here, okay? Good friend of mine. Matter of fact, he used to work with Joseph Kitchen. So he calls this morning. He said, Stan, have you ever thought that maybe the counting of the Omer is not necessarily when the newspaper headline, Omar ushers in Palestinian state, will come out? I said, say on. He said, have you ever looked up what the word usher actually means? I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, you look it up and it means that like you usher someone to their seat in maybe a sports stadium or maybe a church. In other words, it's the guiding them to the place where they're going to conclude. Well, as he's talking and telling me this, and I'm telling him, no, I hadn't thought of that. He said, it may be that it's negotiated during the 49 days at the counting of the Omer, but then sometime after that is when the newspaper headline actually happens. I said, no, I hadn't thought of that. So as I'm talking to him, this email, that's the top one here, came up. And he says, Pastor Stan, to me, it could mean that during the Omer is being presented or ushered in like someone being ushered into a church. But after the Omer is declared, like when that one being ushered in is seated, now let the service begin, meaning but it's declared days after the counting of the Omer. Okay, so what does that mean? It may mean that it happened sometimes after June 16th. Now, no, I would think it happened pretty soon. I would say probably by the end of July. I think maybe August would be stretching it a while, but probably by the end of July. Okay, now let's look at some things with that as a possibility, because that all of a sudden opens up some big doors. And I made my point there, so I'll move on. So we know that Israel will give the Palestinians a state. Now, hang on. We also know that Sunday, by the time you watch this date will have already passed. On 6/9 of 2024, the 70-year-old treaty between the USA and Saudi Arabia expires, meaning the Saudis will no longer be required to sell their oil for U.S. dollars. Well, why is that important? Because they've also announced that they're not going to sell their oil in U.S. dollars anymore, and that means that the petrodollar, or the strength of the dollar, is about to die. Why is that important? Because July 10th, 2012, Shane Warren talked at the Prophecy Club, made a DVD called Judgment, Prophecy. WatchProphecyClub.com will tell you how you can watch the whole thing instantly. WatchProphecyClub.com. And here's the point. He said, first thing he saw in this vision was worthless dollars, fistful of dollars, blowing in the wind, worthless as leaves. Then during that, he said also he saw a major earthquake happen in the New Madrid Fault, and he said, and what caused it was buying oil and another currency boom. So, as of Monday, June the 10th of 2024, the dollar is not going to be the petrodollar anymore. The dollar is no more going to be what they call the reserve currency of the world. And according to an article I'm about to show you, now the yuan, the Chinese yuan, is about to be that currency, meaning that the Chinese yuan is about to go up, the dollar is about to go down. Now, whether it goes down like this, or like this, or like this, most of the prophecies say it happens like this. In other words, one of them said it would go down 30%, boom, instantly, overnight. A couple of months later, 50%. A couple of months later, 66%. Then eventually, worthless as leaves blowing in the wind, and that could happen all the way down to the bottom this year. I mean, I don't know, but let's go on. And I'm going to let you read that if you want to, but the only thing I want to point out here is I saw silver, not gold, begin to drastically increase. He said he saw silver, not gold, begin to skyrocket. All right, now why is that important? I talked to a racquetball buddy of mine last night. He's a Russian, so he doesn't speak English so good. And we're real close, so I turned to him. I said, I'm not a financial expert. I can't give you advice, but, and he's 76. He says, I said, do you have any money in paper? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, do you have your money like in a money market or in the bank or stock market? Or yeah, he says, well, I'll just tell you. He said, I got about $45,000 in a money market. And I said, okay, I'm not giving you advice, but if my mom were to call and say, I got $45,000 in a money market, son, what would you suggest? I would say call 800-200-GOLD, which is 800-200-4653. And I actually sent him the number. I called them and got them hooked up. Why? Because now that we know that the petrodollar has now become the petro yuan, and now that we know the prophecy is about to be fulfilled, now that we know that dollar is about to start dropping like a rock, if you have your money in paper, in other words, if it's not in hard precious metals or land or something like that, I can't tell you what to do. That's against the law. But I can tell you, you probably ought to call these guys and say, okay, here's my situation. You don't have to do anything. Call them. Say, here's my situation. What do you think I should do? 800-200-GOLD, 800-200-4653. Now, let me get on to making my point. This is also another email. Inflation is driving up silver. At least buy some silver to protect your wealth if you cannot afford gold. Gold's $23.43 an ounce, silver $27, oil's $90 a barrel. The Federal Reserve note purchasing power is getting less and less. I think that's good, so I took it out the email and put it in the program. Now, here's the interesting part. So Chris Reed saw the first newspaper handed to him, had the headline, U.S. dollar drops 30% in value, just like Maurice Gillard, Dana Coverstone, Shane Warren, and probably some other ones said. But look at the subtitle. The subtitle here says, Middle Eastern oil strikes deal with China. That's exactly what has happened. Here's the newspaper article to prove it. Petrodollar dusk means it's gone. Petro yuan dawn. Let me say it again. Petrodollar dusk, petro yuan dawn. This is Forbes magazine, okay? What investors need to know. And it goes on to say the same thing. It's saying that the petrodollar is out, the petro yuan is now in. So it could be, we could see this newspaper article maybe even as soon as, well, maybe it's already out. Very good possibility we could see it this week. Now, let's look at the next headline. So how long would it take for this, number one, to cause number two, a perfect storm, inflation reaches a new high? Week? 2 month? Quickly. Then what about a food shortage crisis as wheat and bread imports are at a stalemate? Why would wheat and bread imports come to a stalemate? Well, if you think that the world is just operated by just nothing out there and that there's not an evil group of people in high places that pull the strings, then who knows? But if you think that there's a group of people out there that want to put their man, the Antichrist, on the throne, so he sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, like the Bible says, if you believe that, then you might say, you know what? Maybe they're trying to reduce the food supply so that we have to take the mark. They wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, they would do that. So how long could it be before we see a food shortage? And by the way, for that, I'll send you to josephskitchen.com. We talked about it. Then how long could it be before we start seeing riots, civil unrest, holding up signs that says we want our entitlements? Well, you would like to think that that's probably 2 or 3 months down the road, maybe 3 or 4, maybe the end of the year, maybe fourth quarter. Then what about Israeli-Palestinians' two-state solution reached? Well, now that we're not limited by it happening by June 16th, it could be all these first 5 headlines appear in the next month or 2. Now, I'm not setting a date. I'm a watchman like you. I'm watching. So Israeli-Palestinians' two-state solution hits, then guess what? There's an earthquake just like Leslie was shown, just like Shane Warren was shown, just like Maurice Gillard was shown. Now, let's go on. I got so much, I'm not going to be able to cover all of it. Matter of fact, that's another thing. I've been doing this prophecy stuff, radio and TV, I should say radio and sometimes TV, for 30 years now. I have never seen God talking through dreams and visions and angel visits as much as I have here, really the last 5 years. If we're listening, he's screaming at us. So dollar gone, yuan up. Essentially, that's what it's saying. Now let's go to the next topic. Russia preparing USA attack. Oh, surely not. Yeah, well, I'll let you decide. Now this is from War News. By the way, I found it's actually a Greek site, but it is in Russian. And so it's got some good information. So it says, Putin's landmark decision. Listen carefully. Hit American bases and NATO targets around the world. In other words, Russia, thanks to us sending all of our military and our ammunitions and the hands and the satellites to guide them to hit Russia in Russia. Now all of a sudden Russia says, okay, we know how to handle that. So now Putin's decided to change his strategy. He's saying from now on, hit American bases and NATO targets around the world. Russia's passive attitude is over. It'll start as a rain on a sunny day when you least expect it. Well, wait a minute. We can now expect it. That's right. You can now expect it because you're getting information. But most people don't want to hear Prophecy Club. They don't want to hear the Watchman. They just want to live their life. God, go away. Leave me alone. So it'll hit them as a surprise. For 3.5 hours, the president of Russia informed international media correspondents about Moscow's change of attitude towards the USA and NATO. Russia will now arm, I hope you're listening, arm all U.S. NATO enemies. He'll arm our enemies to strike U.S. military bases and targets around the world in an application of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So that means anybody that is an enemy of America or NATO is now a friend of Russia, and Russia is going to start arming them. Does that sound like the fall of America will start with an internal revolution? In the Kremlin, they say, we hope the West got Putin's message. Obviously, they didn't. Are you hearing any of this on your news? Any of this coming into your news box other than what Prophecy Club puts out? My guess is most of you are saying no. Russia's patience is certainly long, but it's not unlimited. And I agree. I think Russia's been very patient. Russia will give long-range weapons to various regions around the world from where there will be sensitive attacks against countries that supply weapons to Ukraine. That's us. Us, NATO, the Brits, okay? Big problem. U.S. expecting Russian naval exercises in Caribbean this summer. Well, that's what Russia just said that they were going to do. So what are they doing? Russia plans to send combat vessels into the Caribbean region this summer as part of naval exercises, and they will likely include ports of call in Cuba, Venezuela. The United States does not see the move as threatening. Duh. Russian naval activity had ratcheted up because we've been sending weapons to Ukraine and intelligence and fingers to push the buttons. This is about Russia showing that it is capable of some level of global power projection. Putin is trying to warn America and the West. Putin is actually trying to say, look you're making the bear angry. You remember that vision that Dmitry was shown, that the bear would become more angry, finally become very strong, and then finally it would be like men fighting a big bear with sticks. And I think that's NATO. I think Russia will just run over them all. I think that's what the prophecies say, not my opinion. What would I know? In permanent combat formation off the coast of the USA, Russian ships and the state-of-the-art, what does that mean? When they're saying state-of-the-art, it means better submarines than what the U.S. has, better submarines than what NATO has, or Australia, or Brits. That's what they're really saying. In permanent combat formation, what's that mean, formation? It means they are ready to take out America if they want to. Combat formation off the coast of the USA, Russian ships and the state-of-the-art submarine Yasin-M with the supersonic Zircon, Caliber, and Onks missiles on board. Now, what does that mean? Those are the hypersonic missiles. What does that mean? It means that America or NATO can't shoot them down. They were just fired, and they didn't have nuclear warheads on them. They had just regular warheads. But Iran just fired them into Israel. All 8 of them hit. They couldn't stop them. What Russia is saying here is, as Putin has said many times, but we just won't listen. Why don't we listen? Because we have turned our back on Jesus. We've started sinning and doing wickedly, and God is blinding our eyes so that he can bring judgment on us. That's what's really going on. In permanent combat formation off the coast, I just read that, Russian warships and at least 1 nuclear-powered submarine, along with strategic bombers, are deployed off the U.S. coast. And they're going to Cuba and Venezuela. They'll remain in the region until the end of summer to conduct new exercises. Well, any one of those exercises could turn into be the real thing. Moscow did not warn Washington about these exercises. Well, wait a minute. Moscow always does warn when it's an exercise. But maybe it's not an exercise. Maybe it's a message. Maybe it's a prelude to war. I think it's a prelude to war. So then the article went on to tell us a little bit more about these Yasin-class submarines. Truth be known, they're probably more silent, faster, better, more accurate than anything the West has. So the submarine is said to be the quietest in the Russian fleet. They call it, by the way, the black hole. It's so quiet, it can't be detected by anybody. Havana will be the first overseas port to get a visit of the Askstan M class submarine. It carries 40 to 50 cruise missiles. So what does that mean? Well, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm not a military guy, but I think that each one of those cruise missiles can carry, like, I think 8 or 10 warheads. Okay, so what would one submarine, let's say it carries 50 cruise missiles. Each one of them has 10 warheads. One submarine, 50 cruise missiles, 10 each, has 500 nuclear bombs that could destroy easily the top 100 cities in America. And I'm not talking about hitting it with a Hiroshima and Nagasaki bomb. They have bombs out there that are 250 times more powerful than what was dropped on Japan. So 500 of those hit America. There's a scripture I found in prophecy. It says that the earth is moved at the taking of Babylon. In other words, when Russia attacks America, these nuclear bombs going off all at the same time within 1 hour, Revelation 18 says, it literally changes the orbit of the earth. Now, Isaiah 24 says it turneth upside down, scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. Perhaps that's what causes it. We also know that no flesh would be saved except, how's it worded? All flesh, except for God shortened the days, no flesh would be saved. Could it be that that's also what's changed the orbit so that there's not 24 hours in the day anymore? Maybe there's only 20, maybe there's only 18 days. Maybe it changes all kinds of things right here, and we're looking at it, but we can't get anybody to listen to us. So the first one has a range of 320 nautical miles. What does that mean? Now, I started to pull up a map and show you, but as I recall, it's like 1,500 miles from coast to coast. So 320 miles is about a third of the west coast or about a third of the east coast, but there's more. Then the next one has a range of 1,600 nautical miles. What does that mean? It means they can set on our coast and take out any target in America. They can be on the west coast, hit the east coast. Then the next one is the Zircon supersonic missile. Has ranges of 1,000 kilometers, the speeds of Mach 8, and there's another one has a speed, if I remember right, Mach 37, I believe it is. That's fast. We can't shoot it down. Russia's also deployed the Askstan in the Pacific. So they got submarines on the east, on the west, and now they're about to have them on the south. Well, I remember that just brings to mind a scripture that says, and they will, how's it worded? They will surround her round about. I believe it's Jeremiah 50:51. Okay, let's go on. Cuba says Russian nuclear sub to dock in Havana next week. A Russian nuclear-powered submarine will visit Havana next week. Now, they promise it doesn't have any nuclear warheads on it. Well, let's put the shoe on the other foot. If your heart was to destroy Russia, would you put a submarine over next to Russia that doesn't have nuclear warheads on it? If my objective was to destroy Russia, I'd make certain they were loaded to the hilt with nukes. And 3 of the Russian naval vessels, the missile frigate, the unusual deployment of the powerful Russian submarines so close to the United States comes amid major tensions over the war in Ukraine. I can see them running out of time. I got through half of what I've got. Putin says Russia has no imperial ambitions, does not plan to attack NATO. Well, I think that's smart for him to say that. I think I'd do everything. I think the art of war says feign weakness where you're strong and feign strength where you're weak. So if I was planning on a surprise nuclear attack, that's exactly what I would say. Russia declares U.S. enemy, now an enemy of the state for the first time. The Kremlin has now officially labeled the United States as the enemy state for the first time, reflecting the deteriorating relations between Moscow and Washington. The spokesman for Russian President Vladimir Putin stated, "We are now an enemy country for America, just as they are for us." So, my suggestion is that you go to empshield.com, empshield.com, and if you use the promo code PROPHECY right here, get you a $50 discount, and it helps your Prophecy Club. One for each one of your cars, one for your house, so that the plan is that if there's some kind of a nuclear event near you, even lightning, hopefully it's not going to fry your computer chips. Your car still starts, your computers still work. I recommend, if you want to have your wealth not lost, if you've got it in an IRA, if you got it in a 401k, if you got it in a bank, if your wealth is in paper, as Lindsey Williams said, it's worth the paper it's written on. In other words, it's about to be worthless. So I'll send you to prophecyclubgold.com. You can also reach them. Call 800-200-4653. 800-200-4653. They'll give you some ideas on what to do. That is their job, to help you not lose your wealth. I also recommend you go to josephkitchen.com. Get yourself a machine package. That's the wherewithal to grind the wheat berries into flour, put those into a bread machine with 5 other ingredients, push about 2 hours and 40 minutes later, and have a nice hot loaf of whole wheat bread. I've had many people email me. They absolutely love the bread. They love the whole idea. And see, because it's long-term storage food. And as in the days of Pharaoh, what fed the world for 7 years? It was wheat. I believe wheat is God's food for famines, for God's famine food. There is no perfect one food a person could eat for their whole lifetime and be totally healthy. But in my opinion, bread may come the closest. I mean, why does God call us the wheat? Wheat and the tares, okay. I think it's because the primary thing we're supposed to be eating is wheat. So go there, and then after you get the machine package, that's all of the mechanical things to make the bread, then you decide how much food you want. By the way, most of your long-term storage food, you're talking $9,000 or $10,000 to feed one person for 1 year. Did you get that? $9,000 to $10,000, one person 1 year. Joseph Kitchen can show you how to do it for about $1,000 per person. We're not talking about half price. We're not talking about 80% less. We're talking about like 90% less than what the other people can tell you that they can get you long-term storage for. I do not know of anybody that can beat that. This is an actual loaf of bread that I actually made. I eat bread. I mean, I also have to say that it's brought my cholesterol down. It's brought my blood pressure down. And that I don't get hungry as often. I typically will have a slice for breakfast and a slice for lunch, and then a normal meal for whatever. And I've lost 30 pounds over the last year. And in my opinion, I think the primary thing is that did it was, of course, watching what I eat and, all the other things, but bread. So I eat bread as the primary source. And it'll reduce your food budget too. Anyway, go check it out.